In this video, we're going to talk about the uncomfortable overlap between faith and brainwashing. In this video, I'm going to show you that Christianity is brainwashing, and I'm going to prove it to you. And before we dive into that, I want you to know that that doesn't mean that you're brainwashed. It doesn't mean that every church does this or that every person that calls himself a Christian is brainwashed. But when we understand how the mind surrenders autonomy, we will start to see parallels between brainwashing and how the Christian faith is taught and perpetuated. So let's start with the Christian definition of faith. Basically, it means to trust without full evidence. We've heard of the term taking a leap of faith. The Christian faith requires this leap because we don't have full knowledge and evidence of what happened. We have a lot of knowledge, maybe even 95% of what happened we can understand, but we don't have full knowledge. And so it doesn't matter where you are in the journey, you have to take a leap of faith eventually. In Hebrews 11:1, it says, "Now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen." So the Bible itself defines faith as believing without observation, without evidence. Proverbs 3:5, of course, says, "Lean not on your own understanding." I'm sure that we need to go back and look at the context, but just look at the words. 2 Corinthians 5:7, of course, talks about walking by faith, not by sight. This one is very popularly quoted by people in the faith. And of course, in John chapter 20, verse 29, it says, "Blessed are those who believe without seeing." So all over the Bible, we have this theme that you are rewarded, you are virtuous for believing without evidence. It is shown that this faith is a gift. For by grace are ye saved through faith. It is a gift of God. So it is a gift to be able to believe this way, and people will feel righteous by being able to believe without full faith. Well, sorry, without full evidence. This is something good and holy that we should cherish, is this ability to believe without full evidence. Now, the reason that I'm making this video is because as I started looking into this, the psychological mechanics that define faith are indistinguishable. They're the same as the mechanics that are used in thought reform and mind control, aka brainwashing. Both faith in the Christian definition and brainwashing teach you to override your sense of actual truth with your senses in favor of an externally provided truth. So something else is going to give you this truth, and you're going to believe it because you're going to override your senses. Any system that does this, that is teaching you to override your own perception in favor of this other bigger narrative, a protected narrative, is engaging in mind control. Whether they mean to do that or not, whether they're trying to do that or not, if any type of system, whether that's religious, political, or ideological, in school, in your family, doesn't matter, is teaching you to override your senses in favor of this narrative, that is mind control. So a lot of people think that brainwashing and mind control is more of like what you see in the movies, where there's this dark room and they have the clock that is swinging in front of the person's eyeballs, and it's gradually kind of hypnotizing them, and there's torture perhaps involved, and we have these ideas of brainwashing as this like prisoner of war stuff, where like you're captured by the enemy and then they brainwash you into doing what they want you to do. But this doesn't quite explain how and why these methods of brainwashing work to permanently change someone's mind. So just because we see a captor and a captive in a dark room and there's torture involved and they're doing all these brainwashing mechanisms, that doesn't mean that it's easy to see how that's permanently changing someone's sense of reality. So that's what we're going to talk about in this video, first of all, is in these mind control tactics, in these torture chambers, etc., the captives are subject to extreme physical pain, distress, emotional pain. They are tortured. They are shown a lot of uncomfortable sensations, which over time break down the person's sense of reality. So if you're bound to a chair, you're tied into a chair in a dark room for months, it will eventually break your sense of what is true, what is real, because your reality basically begins to shrink, and it only becomes pain or pleasure? Is this safe or is this unsafe? And when every day the captor is coming in and providing very little food, very little water, and just this physical pain, in order to get relief from this physical pain, you have to abide by what they're telling you. You have to admit this other truth that you don't think is true. You have to admit that you're going to see the world in their way in order for the torture to stop, in order for the physical distress to stop. So all you have to do is give them the information that they're asking for or admit this new version of reality, and you will be free from this pain. That's what's happening at the psychological level without going too deep into the neurochemistry and the chemicals that are in the brain. The point is there is relief from the torture if you admit to doing it this way, if you admit to their version of reality, if you admit to their version of events. So eventually that person that is in that torture room, in that dark room with their captor, they're going to override their own senses of what they thought they knew to eventually stop the pain, to stop the distress. And they will admit to the reality that's being pushed onto them because their psyche has been broken. Their sense of reality is warped, is altered, is no longer safe to them. And so they have to pick this new safety in favor of their captor. Their safety as they knew it is going to keep getting them tortured. So they have to choose this new sense of reality in order to stop the torture. So before we get too much deeper in here and start talking about the parallels between this and Christianity, which there are many, and I hope you stay through and watch those, let's look at some of the definitions of brainwashing. And I'm just going to run through a few of these just so we can get a sense of how these dictionaries are defining this term brainwashing. Because a long time ago, this was called mind control, it was called thought reform, it was called other things. And so let's look at some of these definitions. Brainwashing is a systematic effort to persuade a non-believer to accept a certain allegiance, command, or doctrine. It works by controlling someone's physical and social environment, breaking their loyalty to outside groups, and convincing them that their existing thinking is wrong. And it eventually builds unquestioning obedience to whoever or whatever is in control. Another dictionary definition of brainwashing is that it is an intensive, forcible indoctrination, can be political or religious, aimed at destroying a person's basic convictions and replacing them with a fixed new set of beliefs. This, in the American Heritage Dictionary, we actually see that this word brainwashing comes from the Chinese jinao. Please correct me if I'm wrong, jinao. Literally means wash brain. So you're taking what is in the brain, you're washing that clean, and you're replacing it with new things. That's why it's called brainwashing. Another dictionary definition, I think this one's really interesting, is it's a method for systematically changing attitudes or altering beliefs, especially through torture, drugs, or psychological stress techniques. So you change someone's mind by stressing them out and or changing their perception of reality through torture, drugs, and psychological stress. This prolonged stress breaks down a person's physical and mental defenses, which can be both actual persuasion and threats, and threatening. Just threatening is enough to create this level of prolonged stress that will break down a person's physical and mental defenses. Just threatening them. And also it can be physical torture. So let's move on. We've seen enough of those definitions. Yeah, let's go on. There's also some other scientists that study this. We're not going to go too deep into this, but I just wanted to show you that this work is relatively well looked at. I mean, a lot of people have kind of gone in and said, hey, how do you change someone's mind permanently? How did the Nazis do this? How did prisoner of war camps become able to change someone's mind permanently? You know, this person was super loyal to our cause. Now they're captured by the enemy and all of a sudden they believe this totally different thing. How did that happen? People have studied this and they came up with some of their own frameworks. But basically, there are 5 things that we can extract that constitute brainwashing or this level of thought reform. One is forcible indoctrination. It's enforceable by threat of death or severe harm. So you have to threaten someone with death or harm to admit these ideas. The next is a controlled environment. The next is a systematic breaking down of identity. I think this is absolutely incredible because Christianity does this all over the Bible. 2 Corinthians 5:17 says, therefore, if anyone is in Christ, the new creation has come, the old has gone, the new is here. It is literally breaking down the old identity and replacing it with the new one. Let's go on to number 4 of these things that we can extract that are similarities between all the definitions of brainwashing. They all have a deliberate, organized program. And number 5, they have a prevention of escape. You can't leave. So this is where Christians will say, well, of course, that's why I'm not brainwashed. That's why Christianity can't be brainwashing, because I have free will. I choose to be with God, or I choose to walk away at any time. I'm not being held here against my will, is what Christians will say. That's why it's not brainwashing, because I'm choosing this. I'm aware of this, and I have no prevention of escape. I can escape whenever I want to. Therefore, this isn't brainwashing. And there's no controlled environment, okay? I get to come and go as I please. I can be at my house, I can be at the concert, I can be over here, I can watch this movie, I can do whatever I want. I'm not a prisoner in Christianity. That's why this is not brainwashing. All right, so now I'm going to explain why this is all so dangerous. And it's because it's extremely subtle. And we can see it in this example where people are saying, well, I'm not brainwashed because I have free will. So let's look at that. People don't actually have an honest choice to stay in Christianity or to go. And this is because of very subtle psychological mechanisms. Just stay with me here. Very subtle psychology that is happening in their subconscious. That means in the back of their brain, things that they're not thinking about consciously in their prefrontal cortex. Big words, doesn't matter. It means that they're not thinking about it with awareness. It's in the back of their head. This fear is in the back of their mind, the fear of being separate from God, the fear of hell, the fear that they are not right with God, and that they will not inherit the kingdom of righteousness and goodness that God talks about and that Jesus talked about. They're afraid that they won't be able to access this. And that fear, if you believe that, even just a little bit, that hell exists or that you're going to be separate from God if you don't believe this, it plants a seed in the subconscious, in the back of their mind. That maybe they're not acting out this all the time, maybe they're not thinking about it in the front of their mind all the time, but it's an identity level change in the back of their mind, in their subconscious. So in the back of the mind, they believe a little bit that if they don't believe, they're going to be separate from God. So that constant threat is looming in the background. So because of that, it means that the person isn't actively thinking about this directly, just like I just explained. And the conscious mind, the frontal cortex, the executive functioning of the mammalian brain that we know that we as humans have, that part of the brain is what explains everything, is what has the executive function. It's the higher level thinking. It's going to explain the feelings and the identities that are had in the subconscious, in the back of the mind. So if that person truly believes that they might be separate from God, that they're risking eternal damnation if they don't follow these rules according to God's laws, they can become their own captor and captive in their own mind. Because in order to be right with God, in order to prevent separation from God forever and or eternal torture forever in hell, depending on what kind of version of Christianity you believe in order to prevent that, they have to be hyper vigilant of their own thoughts. They have to basically be monitoring themselves at all times to make sure that they're still right with God. This is functionally identical to being physically prevented from leaving and to being physically tortured, because every thought they have is a reminder that they are going to die and they're going to be separate from God. Every thought that they have, they look out at the thing and they're like, oh, this is my sinful nature again. This is again the reminder of this identity that they told me I need to replace. Everything they do, everything they think becomes something that is filtered through good or bad. They become their own captor, keeping themselves captive. They're not able to think freely. They have to think within a certain narrow framework. And they are keeping themselves from leaving this narrow framework that they've now inherited because of this fear. And this is why this is so dangerous, because it's extremely subtle. And very smart people know how to justify it. That's what the executive functioning is doing. This frontal cortex in the brain, this very human part of the brain, that's exactly what it's doing, is it's justifying the feelings that it thinks it has in the back of its mind. The brain doesn't know the difference between perceived pain and real pain. There are so many studies on this. It's actually fascinating. I might have to make another video about it. But imagining reality is just as powerful as being in the reality. I know that there's like weightlifting studies, there's basketball studies, there's music playing studies where people that just imagine doing it perform better than the people that practice physically with the ball in their hands or with the sport or with the physical lifting or with the instrument in their hands. Imagining it is just as powerful as doing it. The brain doesn't know the difference. This also explains a lot of things, including anxiety and lots of other things I'm not going to get into this video, but this is a core fundamental part of what we know about psychology, is that the brain doesn't know the difference between perceived pain and real pain. So when you're sitting there and you're the captor of your own captive mind, and the captive mind is thinking in these sinner ways, it's creating a perceived pain, which is therefore a real pain inside of the mind and body of the believer. It is literally a torture tactic, a self-torture tactic. So free will here isn't actually free because the person doesn't know that the subconscious fear has gripped them. They don't know that that's happening in the background. They think that this is other explanation for it. And so they don't rationally choose to stay. They're actually complying under a threat. If I put a gun to your head and I say that you better give me $10,000 or I'm going to shoot you, that is not giving you a choice. That's called giving you an ultimatum. Because the choice is between doing what I say or death. And life always wants to live. So if the person really believes this in the back of their mind, that they might go to hell if they don't believe this way, and therefore die and be separate from God forever, they don't actually have a choice whether to believe or not. Their fear is going to take over, and their executive functioning is going to justify that and be able to explain with lots of pretty words and apologetics and Bible verses for why they're choosing to stay, even though what's really running them is a human survival-based instinct that is actually present in every mammal. What's actually running that is a survival-based instinct. And that's not free will. That's not actually giving them the choice. They think they have the choice, but the choice is between that and death. That's called an ultimatum. This is what makes brainwashing so subtle and what makes it so dangerous. The person does it to themselves as an individual with no one else in the room. They don't realize that their ability to choose honestly was twisted. Their survival instinct is what's being run underneath. Their survival instinct has been hijacked by these ideas, and they don't actually get the choice to choose honestly. We think that torture-based mind control is unethical, but we celebrate religious faith when it does the same thing. It's unethical to torture someone, and we think that it's not right for people to hurt themselves, but if they're doing it to their own mind in their own room by themselves in their private thoughts, then it's okay. Either way, the person, whether it's mind control or in religion, is unable to see the mechanism that has changed their mind. They don't actually know what has truly changed their mind. They're taking the ideas of what's been told to them, and they're saying, okay, I changed my mind because I'm a new creation in Christ, and because I now live by faith, not by sight, and because I have been saved through grace, and because I feel these amazing feelings, and because I feel Jesus walking in my life. But they don't actually know at the neurological level why they have changed their mind. Really, what this is more like trauma bonding, which again is a topic for another video. But what really changes people's minds here are a very particular set of psychological buttons that are authority, social proof, identity fusion, fear, shame and guilt relief loops, co-regulation, being chosen, also called illusory superiority. The RAS is the reticular activating system, and the self-contained system. So the self-contained system is one of the reasons why these religious systems are so powerful, is because they answer every question. There's no question that you can't ask that isn't already contained inside of this system. And that is very, very powerful to the human brain because we don't like open loops. We don't like uncertainty. So when everything is answered and it gives us this sense of certainty, it's a very powerful checkoff in the brain that allows us to feel safe enough to believe it, especially if we have an authority there. Like we trust the authority that's giving it to us. We trust the group of people that are in there. We have already fused our identity to it. It's not just that I believe in Christ, it's that I am a Christian. I am this thing. And then, of course, there's the guilt relief loop. It's like in order to stay in the group, you have to abide by certain regulations. And the feeling of not being according to those regulations creates this need to then once again be right with the group, be right with the authority. There's co-regulation, which is where when you move with the same people at the same time, it regulates your nervous system. This is essentially a drug. I mean, it's natural human part of the system. It's a natural human part of our living system. But if we aren't aware of it, it's very easy for this to be hijacked. And we see this in all kinds of things, like in yoga and military. I mean, you name it, dancing. Doing things together with other people is very bonding and very powerful and can create this feeling of God. Topic for another video here, but being chosen is very powerful. Feeling of status is very powerful. The RES is the brain's filter. So that's when everything you think you see is confirming your belief back to you, because that's what you've chosen to see. Even if you're not sure that that's what you've chosen to see, there's a filter that is confirming back to you what you have put in your head. If you ever have met someone that's like super negative, it's like they can't even see the positivity in things. And it's because their filter is primed to see the negative. And then same with other people that are just like chronically positive. It's like their brain is primed to see the good. And we can do this consciously. The problem is that a lot of us don't know that we can do it consciously. And so therefore we fall for systems that tell us what our filters should be filtering for. So why doesn't it feel like being brainwashed? Why doesn't Christianity feel like it's some sort of super control mechanism? I mean, some people think so, but a lot of people don't. And this is why, is because in these physical torture examples where there's a captor and a captive in this dark room and there's torture happening, it happens really fast. This mind control, this mind change system can happen very quickly because it's in a controlled environment and, excuse me, every part of what they're doing is directed toward that change. So that person is captive in a room and there's no part of their reality that isn't aimed at them believing this new thing. So because of that, it's like putting fuel in the fire, you know, it's like supercharged. Like it happens much faster because of this controlled environment. In Christianity, people have more perceived agency. They can go and come back as they please. You know, they're in control of a lot more of these little pieces, or so it seems. And so that process takes much longer, sometimes months and years. The longer the person is in it, the more entrenched the belief system becomes. And this is actually a gradual type of hypnosis. It's called entrenchment. Milton Erickson looked into this. There's a lot of studies about it. It's fascinating. Basically, the more you do it, the deeper you get into it and the harder it is to see out of it. So the slower timeline doesn't make the brainwashing methodology any less effective. It actually just makes it harder to see. It makes it less obvious. And that is, of course, why it's so dangerous and why it's important that we continue to talk about it. So this is why I have so much empathy for people in the Christian faith. Even the ones that are terrible people, that are not acting the way that Christ says they should in the Word, I have empathy for them too, because I believe that these people are victims to an ideology that gripped their subconscious before they knew it was happening. I think that above all else, having compassion and gentleness with everyone is the answer here. These people, especially if they're in religious faith, they're looking for love. Like they're looking to be loved. They're looking for an eternal unconditional love. They're looking for certainty. They're looking for safety. These are things that have always been solved by religion, whether it's Native American religion, whether it's Buddhist, whether it's some sort of Asian or African religion. These are the things that are fundamental core human needs for every single human being on the planet. So instead of sitting there and arguing with each other why that one's incorrect or that one's incorrect, how about we just go back to the root and continue to treat people with love and gentleness and compassion and have intellectual honesty and say, hey, I understand you believe that, but have we looked at this evidence? Have we looked at this information here? I understand that you have a lot of ties to this belief system and that you really want to believe it in this way. Have you looked into how other people are solving the same thing? Are you aware of some of these other angles of education that we can expand on? And I want to tell you that in a loving and gentle and compassionate way without arguing with you. And we might agree to disagree. But I know that it's my job to say something, and I know that I'm probably not going to change your mind all right away, but I can probably help us both, because you're going to teach me too. I'm probably going to help us see things a little bit with a bigger perspective. You're going to teach me a little bit, I'm going to teach you a little bit, and that's how we continue to grow and learn together. As soon as I'm closed off to it, I'm brainwashed. If I can't change my opinions, if I can't change the way I look at certain facts, if I can't look at the facts at all, that is a symptom of brainwashing. When you're not brainwashed, you're able to look at this information in an honest way, and you're able to adjust your beliefs. It might be a little painful, it might be a little difficult, it might take you some time, but you're able to say, hey, you know what? I think I was wrong about that. I'm going to update what I think. Being able to do that is evidence that you're not brainwashed. Conflict doesn't help, because conflict is going to close other people off. So when we talk about this, it's important to not just tell people that they're wrong or call them brainwashed or call them dumb or call them any of this. If we want to actually change the world and change people's minds, we have to do so gently, gradually, patiently, and be able to do it over a long period of time. Eventually, when enough people are seeing this and understand this, it will become silly to believe in religion to the level that a lot of people believe it. And therefore, the brain buttons will switch. The psychological mechanisms that keep people in religion will suddenly start to get people out of religion. The authority of God will stop making sense according to the Bible. Like, people will see that God is maybe a bigger idea. And the social proof of look at all the people that believe will suddenly be on the outside. Look at all these people that don't believe. Topic for another video. But anyway, the last thing I'm going to say here is that even though Christianity is taught in a way that parallels brainwashing, that doesn't mean all churches are inherently evil. It doesn't mean that everyone who calls themselves a Christian is brainwashed, although I personally think that a lot of them are, especially if they can't admit that they might be brainwashed. A brainwashed person can't admit that. So if you try to bring something up like this to them, and they fight you on it, and they're just not taking anything you're saying, it's more evidence that their mind has been permanently thought reformed. And by permanently, I mean it's semi-permanent. It's going to take years or decades for them to see their way out of it, and it's a personal journey. We can't drive that or change that for them. They have to be able to go through the steps of fear, shame, and guilt and understanding over time to eventually see that. And I think the more of us do this work, the faster that's going to be, because the human finds safety in numbers. So the more numbers there are of people that can see through this, the more they're going to feel safe seeing through it as well. And just because Christianity is taught in a way that parallels brainwashing, it doesn't mean that there isn't a higher power. It doesn't mean God doesn't exist. That's a topic for another video. Even though Christianity parallels brainwashing, it doesn't mean that Christianity isn't helpful or life-changing to people. I personally think it means that we can find better ways and extract what's decent here, which is also decent in many religions, and be able to use that to change people's lives, like AA, like Alcoholics Anonymous. That is a way that people change their lives for the better, get better habits, become more loving, more conscientious, more responsible people without religion. And there is a little bit of belief-based stuff in AA, but the point is that these things can be helpful and they don't have to be true. So what this means is that the way Christianity is taught has parallels to what we know about how to permanently change someone's mind. So that's not an honest use of free will. That's not an honest choice. And I think that's something that we need to be talking about more. If you like this video, please let me know. If you want more of this content, check out my book. It's called Sold on God: What the Church Sold You That You Never Agreed to Buy. Look forward to seeing you again. Peace.